Illegal aliens of America, listen up. President Trump is making you an offer you frankly don't deserve, but would be unwise to refuse. Find out next. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the Tomi Lahren is Fearless YouTube page at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Liberal Tuesday starts right now.
What we thought we'd do is a self-deport, where we're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from, and they have a period of time. And if they make it, we're going to work with them so that maybe someday, with a little work, they can come back in if they're good people, if they're the kind of people that we want in our company, industrious people that could love our country. And if they're not, they won't. But it will give them a path to becoming, to coming back into the country. If they miss that limit, they're going to be taken out of our country, and they will never get a path to come back in, and it'll be a much tougher process. And it's called self-deportation. And by doing that, you're talking about so many millions of people.
Well, there you have it, folks. President Trump once again being far more charitable and compassionate and generous than he should be, or that he gets credit for. He's offering illegal aliens currently residing in America the deal of a lifetime. If they sign up for self-deportation on the newly repurposed CBP One app, they will be given a complimentary commercial plane ticket back to where they came from, and on top of that, they'll get a whopping $1,000 once it's confirmed they have indeed left our country. DHS will also cut them some slack if they take the deal, and will deprioritize them for ICE arrest while they get their ducks in a row and get the hell out. But not only that, they also may be given the opportunity to come to this country the right way in the future. Wow. DHS says this offer to illegals will save American taxpayers 70%, as it currently costs DHS on average over $17,000 to arrest, detain, and deport someone from the U.S., while paying for self-removal flights, and the stipend is projected to cost just $4,500 and will be safer for ICE and preserve their resources. If you're an illegal, take this deal. Take it now, take it fast. This is far more than you deserve, frankly. You disrespected our nation by coming here illegally. You cut in line. You were then given resources, lodging, food to eat, health care, and far more perks and privileges than are generally afforded to struggling American citizens. And now you could get a free ticket home and be paid for returning home even though you broke the law to come here. Wow, it is your lucky break. Now, my thought on this is this. I'm happy to get illegal aliens out of this country, either by force or self-deportation, whatever is fastest and cheapest. But it is really sick and stomach-churning that due to Joe Biden letting millions in, we now have to pay for the commercial flights to get them out, as well as payment to entice them to leave. It's shameful we're in this mess, but here we are, and President Trump, well, he's making the best out of it. Joining me now on this coveted Liberal Tuesday is our friend from the other side of the divide, the Behrman firm owner and attorney, our friend Ethan Behrman. All right, Ethan. I think this self-deportation offer is the deal of a lifetime. I think it's very generous. I think it's allowing people the dignity to go on their own. What say you?
Well, oddly, this is going to be one of the rare times that we have some agreement, Tomi, although we do find that periodically. But I think the idea of incentivizing people to leave of their own accord obviously is a logical move. What I think it's only half the story, though. So again, if somebody's ready to leave, they don't want to be here anymore, sweet. Here's a ticket home. There's $1,000. Go back and enjoy your life where you came from. However, I think it ignores some of the reality of, in particular, places like California, but really the Farm Belt in general, which is we have a large number of agricultural workers where the farmers or the workers or the government, whoever failed, we have agriculture work visa programs now that have not worked well. And I believe that Senator Gallego's proposal out of Arizona should be the other side. So give them the option to go home. Here's a flight ticket. Here's $1,000. See you later. But the other is pay $5,000, pay for your background check, and keep working on our farms and in our hospitality industry and everywhere else as long as they pass the background check. I think that's the other side.
Let me tell you my problem with that. That sounds good in theory. Here's a couple things I have an issue with. Paying the $5,000 fine, we know the nonprofits, the NGOs, the attorneys, they're going to cover that. We know that already, all right? There's going to be a slush fund for that, as there is for everything else related to this problem. They're going to pay that. As for the background check, like that sounds great, but what if you come from a country that doesn't really have a background check system? You're coming from Venezuela, guess what? They don't share their records with us. You're coming from China, that's not going to happen. So here's my thing. Just because you get a background check doesn't mean we're going to know everything about you if you're coming from some of these countries. So to me, you're still a national security threat if we can't vet you. And that's part of the problem with opening the borders in the first place is we didn't vet these people. And, you know, it's not because Border Patrol didn't want to. A lot of times they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the information. These countries are not saying, oh, yes, murderer, rapist, you know, they're not telling us the information. So that's my concern with that proposal. Good in theory, but do you see where we could have some hangups?
Well, yes. I mean, there's no way that a basic background check covers everything anyway. And that's why some of us have said, even if I disagree with how President Trump has approached it, many people I talk to on the left included, you know, look, we don't want violent criminals here either. And so to deport those people is the logical thing. The key is to follow due process, and of which President Trump has been caught not following, or at least through his administration, not following the rule of law that we have in this country. We don't have a dictatorship. We don't have a king. We don't have an autocrat that just operates on his own. And so that's why I like the idea that you first brought up of the, hey, if you're willing to self-deport, of course, that's the most logical thing. But there is no perfect system. Look how many Americans commit crime. Look how many people get let out of prison and then, fall into recidivism and commit crimes again. You can't just throw everybody away for life. It doesn't work to do that either. And just like we do rely on immigrant labor in the United States, so we do need good people who come here that want to
work for less. I mean, Ethan.
Well, that's why the visa program's in.
The Democrat Party loves their cheap labor, and to me, and I'm not putting you in that bucket, Ethan, but let's just be honest. These people that are hiring illegal aliens, they're hiring them because yes, they're willing to do the work, but they're willing to do the work for much less. So to me, making that argument, I understand California's ag industry and Florida and elsewhere. I understand that they've got a lot of illegal alien labor, and a lot of these people are good people that work hard, and I'm not taking that away from them. They're doing hard, honest work. I come from an agriculture state. I know it's hard work, but the thing of the whole argument of like, we need them because we can pay them less to do crap jobs, I think that's a hard sell.
Well, but the argument against that is very clear, which is during the presidential race, the complaint was inflation. And that is exactly what happens if you get rid of cheaper labor. Now, all of a sudden, the labor costs a lot more, which means that the farmers have to raise their prices to afford to pay the farmhands to help pick the crops and everything else. Look, there's a balance to be found. I don't disagree with you. I've always argued that we need to know who comes into our country. We have absolutely the right to know that every country on earth does who crosses their borders. I've never agreed with this idea that we just have open borders. But the balance is that unlike when I was a kid, I'm a bit older than you, growing up in the farm state next door, Tomi. But we don't have high schoolers that are willing or able or whatever to take all of the jobs that need to happen. Even when I was a kid, people used to migrate up from Mexico to pick the corn in the fields in Minnesota. And they would go back home in the winter is what's different. And we changed something. By the way, the Republicans were part of that because they wanted cheap labor too.
You're right.
And so, I mean, we have everybody to blame in this situation, why we didn't control our border. So I think we agree on this idea that we need to know who's here. We need to get rid of those who commit crimes that came here, whether they even had our permission to come here. You come here and you commit a violent crime of any kind, you can't stay. Go home. I think we agree on that. But we do need a balance in the labor market because the robots can't do it all quite yet, but they're getting there.
Yeah, again, I think that's a hard narrative to push, that like we must keep illegal aliens in this country in the shadows because we have to have our cheap labor. Like it's a hard, I appreciate the transparency, but God,
But I
that
don't think
don't
they should
sound
be in the
good.
shadows, Tommy. I don't think they should be in the shadows. And I think this is where we actually agree. They shouldn't be in the shadows. Pay the $5,000 fine. Actually get one of the visas on the agriculture visa program or a different one that works better. But make sure that we know who they are. We can keep track of them. They pay taxes, etc. And we deport them. But the problem is neither party has wanted to actually have that honest conversation about it. And I don't fully agree with you here either, but the idea that people living in the shadows, that's a terrible idea all the way around, and they get abused as a result as well.
You're right. Okay. I know that this could be a lengthy conversation. So, for the interest of time and so many things that I want to get to today, I'm going to ask that we both try to condense it, even though I'm sure we have a lot of thoughts. You brought up the due process thing. So, I have to ask you about the Democrat darling, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, known wife beater, alleged MS-13 gang member, here illegally. When they say due process, you're an attorney. You are legally far more brilliant than me. I will give you that 100 times over. You are way smarter than me on the law. But to my small little layman's term mind, when you have an immigration court that's like, this person's here illegally, right? And I understand that he had a hold, but he had a hold because he said he feared a rival gang. So that's kind of an admission that you're in a gang, one. But the court said that this man has ties to MS-13 that are credible ties. And it wasn't just two courts. It was the Prince George County law enforcement. And we now know his wife has come out and said that she feared for her life. He said something to the effect of, nobody can do anything to me if I were to kill you. I mean, this guy is not a great guy. Video of him, body cam footage of him traipsing through my state of Tennessee with people in the car. They didn't have luggage. Some issues. So when the Democrats say we want due process, do they mean that they want 10 to 20 million illegals to all have trials with a jury of their peers? Like, what does that mean exactly?
I mean, you're asking exactly the right question. I may disagree with some of your adjectives used to describe it, but here's the basic premise. And actually, conservative hero, Supreme Court Justice who's passed away, may he rest in peace, Antonin Scalia is the one who helped spell this out. But let's start with the basics. We are a country of laws. And we are a country where it's not a country of man or of men like the King of England, where he could just do what he wanted. So this country was founded on the idea that we have laws, and due process is part of that. And what due process means is anybody, and by the way, the Constitution says any person, it doesn't say any citizen under the purview of our government here. And so that's the key difference here is, yes, if all of that is true, you have to get them in front of a judge who says, yep, this is true, get the heck out of here. They have to have a right to be heard in court. And there's a lot of complexity there of how that exactly works. But yes, due process means you, me, Melania, when she first came to this country, the first lady, anybody who is here has the right to be heard, again, with varying degrees, depending on the circumstances. But Justice Antonin Scalia is the one who talked about this a lot, that in the United States, due process applies, even if you aren't here without legal permission to be here.
But here's my question. That's the crux of this, right? I understand what American citizens are afforded, but it's a hard sell to the American people, once again, when you say that somebody who is an illegal alien, there's no dispute that this person has been in this country illegally, Kilmar Abrego Garcia and others. You're in this country illegally. The immigration court says you're here illegally. And they also say, by the way, probably ties to MS-13 here, some pretty credible ties. So to say that the president and this administration has to take millions and millions of people and not only have an immigration hearing, but give them extra hearings to be able to appeal a known fact that they're in the country illegally. Nobody cried about this when Obama was deporting 3 million people. Ethan, you know that if this due process that you're talking about was followed under the Obama administration, we'd still be going through these due process hearings, wouldn't we?
So no, he did follow. I mean, so President Trump is the first president in recent history to try and avoid due process, where he absconded this individual and sent them to a prison in El Salvador. That's what's fundamentally different here, is he didn't just send him back to where he came from. He sent him specifically to a prison, and that president of El Salvador is claiming that he's not going to give him back, even when a judge in the United States orders it. That's the difference, and that's why I think President Trump trying this idea of self-deportation is acknowledging the fact that due process is a real thing that our courts have upheld for centuries now, and that especially after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment expanded and ensured that we were applying it equally, not just to white people. And that is why the self-deportation and this idea of potentially paying a fine and getting a work visa is the right approach. Because you're right, if you're going to try and do 10 million at once, yeah, that's going to overload the court systems. And by the way, very unpopular for anybody who's not a lawyer or a judge in the system. Our courts are severely underfunded, both at the federal level and at the state levels, almost everywhere. And nobody says, hey, let's give 10 billion to the court so they can actually work more efficiently. And that's something that just absolutely, the Chief Justice has said this many times as well. We need funding for our judicial system so we don't have some of these arguments that are going to be a problem.
I guess the average folk out there like me, we would like to see people who are wife beater, gangbanger, illegal aliens with ties to MS-13. We'd like to see their removal expedited. You know, we don't really want them living in the country for 5 to 6 years while they appeal and while they get a court-appointed lawyer that we're paying for and all this other stuff. We just don't want to see that. We think that if somebody broke into our country illegally, that we should be able to remove them from our country. And we find it hard to believe that the President of the United States, somebody who is our commander-in-chief, tasked with our national security and our foreign policy, is not allowed to remove people who came here illegally. So
yeah, and I mean, that's just the three branches of government and checks and balances that are built into our Constitution.
yeah,
there are limits on what the president can
what
do.
message does this send? Like, I get your point on the legal thing, and I want to wrap this up because we could talk about it all day, frankly. And I'm intrigued to know the legal perspective. I really am. Also, I would like to point out that President Trump did say that he is following what the courts say. He said that in an interview the other day, and conveniently, the liberal media glossed over it. He said he's not going to defy the courts. He said he leaves it to the lawyers. So I want to point that out. But also, I want to say this. It's hard for me to understand and for many people to understand the message this is sending to the rest of the world, that you can come into our country illegally and you can cut the line and you can pay a smuggler, a coyote, a drug cartel to get into our country illegally. You can then go live in our country and basically be caught and released because of Joe Biden. And then you are now then afforded this extreme due process that you didn't want to follow the process to get in here, but now there's a hell of a process to get you out. To me, that sends the message to the rest of the world. Go ahead, go to the United States illegally. You'll be caught up in the court system for 5 to 6 years. They might even just forget about you. You might slip through the cracks and be allowed to stay, because that's actually what's happened.
So, but this is what I'm getting at, and I really wish this would be a nonpartisan talking point. Our courts are underfunded.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take 5 to 6 years. You know, I was just in court here in Los Angeles the other day, and there was a trial being set where finally it was ready for a trial, March of 2027. Right. And that's because our courts are underfunded. If we do, I'm with you. Look, you commit a violent crime in my country. You're beating your wife. You murdered somebody. You violently, whatever. I want you out of here as fast as possible as well. And it shouldn't take 5 years. And part of that really is we don't have sufficient funding to process the people in accordance with the law. And it's not good for anybody. And I really wish this would be something that people would get behind, is we have got to fund our court system. Okay. So this doesn't take 5 years. It's wrong.
Agree with you. Now, this is my last point on this. Do you think, though, while these people are awaiting the due process, do you think that they should be held in ICE detention? Because if they really are just waiting for the process, they probably shouldn't be allowed to just go willy-nilly and do whatever they want, right? Like, if we already know you're illegally, there's no dispute that they're here illegally, shouldn't they be held in ICE detention then?
Well, I think that depends, right? I mean, anybody who's been accused of a crime
Well,
right?
coming to
I
the
believe.
country illegally is a crime. I mean, if you think that they
Like,
should just be able to go out and just do whatever they want until they get their case heard for the
I mean, if
fifth
it's a
time?
5-year-old who came across with their parents, yeah, I mean, holding them in ICE, maybe there's a better place to hold them than in an ICE
Well, there's
detention
like
facility.
300,000 of them that are missing, so maybe the ICE detention facility might have been a little safer than wherever they were trafficked to. That's a problem.
Well, look, human trafficking is one of the most horrific things, and I believe we may get to something related to that later in today's show. But I think you have to, still treat people humanely. ICE detention facilities, you've been accused of a crime. I kind of don't care at that point. You need to just have the minimum. But if you're a wife with 3 kids and the husband was arrested, and I think you need to at least have some concern for the individual. And treat them.
How about we make this could be a happy medium? You're in the country illegally. We know you're in the country illegally. And then your wife files protective orders against you, and 2 courts and the Prince George County says that you have ties to MS-13. Maybe we shouldn't be allowing this person to just roam freely. Like, can you agree with that? That maybe, they should have detained him and he should have been in ICE detention, not frolicking about?
I mean, I think probably.
Does it depend? Yeah, because you know what else? If you're an MS-13 member and you're beating your wife, I don't think that you should be roaming around.
It's just an allegation that he is an MS-13 member. He didn't have the words tattooed on his hand.
He had symbols on his hand, and Ethan.
Right. But you have to let a judge decide that.
Two judges did decide that. No, but Ethan, this is where I'll push back, because 2 judges did say this person's MS-13 affiliated. He was rolling around with MS-13 members. You don't just get to hang out with MS-13 members. You don't just get to be like, hey, hi, Joe. No.
If what you're saying is true, again, I don't know all the details of this case. Immigration is.
I do. I mean, I've been following this really closely, but I appreciate your sentiment. You are far more reasonable about it than a lot of the Democrats who are going to El Salvador to have margaritas, allegedly, with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I do want to move on, though, because there's so much for us to talk about. Another one is because you were in California, so I have some California things for you. So President Trump said he wants to slap 100% tariff on movies that are made outside of the U.S. Now, I would think that might rejuvenate Hollywood, like Hollywood needs it. That's good for California, right? What do you say about this?
Oh, Tomi, I'm going to say something that's going to blow your mind for a second. I think that often President Trump has an idea that's rooted, like the kernel of it is right. We have a real problem in Hollywood shipping jobs everywhere else. Whether it's Canada, whether it's England, whether it's New Zealand, sometimes you really do have to film in these foreign places. You really do. I mean, you think back to the original Star Wars, they really had to go to Africa and film some of that. Lord of the Rings, yeah, you had to be in New Zealand to film that. I love the idea of trying to ensure that Hollywood does more here in the United States, in California in particular, is really severely problematic at the moment. But 100% tariff, I just don't see how that works, because goods are what we put tariffs on. You're shipping a widget from China to the United States. It's very easy to put a tariff on it, even if I disagree with maybe the percentage or the approach that Donald Trump is taking, President Trump. But here, I don't see how 100% tariffs works, because what it is you have big companies with deep pockets, publicly traded. All they care about, Tomi, back to the immigration issue, is lowest cost of labor. And what they have found is the incentives in some of these other countries have made it so much cheaper to go film in the UK or in Canada or somewhere else. So what we ought to do instead of a tariff is we need to ensure that we have a harmonized policy, maybe as a tax deduction, to directly address what makes it so much less expensive to go film in the UK, Canada, etc. I don't think the tariff is the right approach. I love the idea of how do we help Hollywood and keep those jobs here. By the way, Nashville is a boom town right now for entertainment in the Hollywood arena. There's a big new company there that's producing a lot of great content. And we just need to keep that going. But tariffs aren't the right approach. I think a harmonized tax deduction for Hollywood is a much better approach.
Well, I will say at least President Trump is doing something, because Gavin Newsom he's failing on that point.
He just increased the amount that we have in California for filmmakers here. It's still not enough, but he did something.
Yeah, well, he's busy doing his podcast. We all know that. Let's go to another bold idea from President Trump, reopening Alcatraz. What do you think about that one, Ethan?
I think that's a terrible idea. I love the thinking of putting the worst prisoners in the worst possible prisons. We already have those. Pelican Bay is an example of that, among many others of our Supermax system. The problem with Alcatraz is really twofold, and it's basic logistics are the issue. One is that prison's been abandoned since 1963. It's on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. You know, it's been really popularized through movies. I mean, I love The Rock, right? It's a great movie. But the problem is it's in absolute disrepair. The reason we closed it in 1962 with it, or that's when the order came down, is because it's just too damn expensive. It's 2.5 to 3 times the cost of putting them in prison on land somewhere, including our Supermax prisons. So if we're talking about trying to be more efficient with our government spending, Alcatraz is the absolute worst example. And to take it one step further, why it's a terrible example, is it's one of the most popular tourist destinations and actually generates revenue for our federal government as well. So here we want to make sure that we secure our worst offenders in a Supermax, but Alcatraz, not a great idea.
Well, I don't know. I think you could flip that thing. You could send HGTV in there, make it suitable for the prisoners. Maybe even send Kilmar Obrego Garcia there, while he's waiting for his due process. I don't know. I think it's an inspired idea, maybe logistically a little difficult, but I think anything can be done. I wanted to get your take on this on the pop culture side. So I don't know how familiar you are with Barstool and Dave Portnoy, but there was a dust up over the weekend at a Philly Barstool bar with someone with a horrible, awful anti-Jewish sign. And Dave Portnoy was really upset about it. He wanted to address the issue. Now, this is, changing by the day exactly what the punishment is going to be. But initially, his plan was, hey, I'm going to send these troublemakers to Auschwitz to see, the real depth and despair of what the Jewish people had to endure. I want to take a look at this clip from Dave Portnoy and have him explain his thought process.
My initial reaction was like, I'm going to burn these people to the ground, their families, everything. And it's like, you know what? Maybe that's not the best course of action. Maybe I can use this as a teaching moment. I'm sending these kids to Auschwitz. They've agreed to go, and they're going to do a tour of the concentration camps in Germany and hopefully learn something. I talked to both of them on the phone. Both of them took accountability. Both of them were like, yeah, we did this, and we're willing to go and try to learn. Well, then I see a now deleted, I think it was an Instagram or Snapchat story of one of the kids, Mo Khan, the one who posted the video, claiming he was just being a citizen journalist. Buddy, what are you doing? I'm like trying to make this a teachable moment. Maybe if you actually learn a life lesson, maybe if people watch you go to Poland and seem like you're changed, this gets behind you. But now, no, I'm not going to send him now.
So what do you think about the initial idea and just the whole situation in general?
Look, I have always enjoyed Dave Portnoy's pizza reviews. I might disagree with him politically on a number of things. He is so spot on this issue. It is so deeply offensive what they did. And keep in mind, it's not just these two people. Somebody had to order that sign. Then somebody in the back had to actually go make that deeply offensive sign. And then these people are trying to back out of their own accountability. I love the idea that the far left and the far right need to both have some real education about the 0.2% of the world's population, which is Jewish people. We still have fewer people on earth than before the Holocaust. That's how genocide actually works for the idiotic pro-Hamas crowd who doesn't understand facts at all. Or reality or history. They've just been lied to and they give into it. And that's what's likely to have happened in that situation, is that they just absolutely believe the lies. Dave Portnoy is right. You address it head on. You address it through education. Right here in LA, we have the Museum of Tolerance. I love the idea of sending them off to visit the concentration camps in Poland that the Nazis ran. I think Dave Portnoy is so on this. I applaud him for his reaction.
Yeah, it was great that he was so outspoken about it as well. Not all institutions are as outspoken as a bar, which is really deeply troubling. And I'm wondering, because I know you're very obviously very passionate about this. What do you think of our, education secretary, Linda McMahon, trying to kind of defund Harvard and really, put it to them that they've got to deal with their anti-Semitism among other universities? Now, the left doesn't like that, but I'm wondering your unique take on it.
Well, I think it's both good and bad. It's good because Harvard, Columbia, Berkeley, UCLA, I can just go on and on, absolutely failed their Jewish students. Absolutely have failed them. The discrimination, the hate, again, the example that many of us who are even on the liberal side would give the example of how wrong these schools were and how awful their actions and failure to act were, is if that was a white supremacist group running around in hoods calling for, the death of black people and to send them back to Africa and get them out of our what would these schools have done? But because it's Jewish people, and by the way, I'm a minority Jew, Ashkenazi Jew with the pale skin because we were out of Israel for 2,000 years since the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Romans. That's why we have the pale skin. I still have the genetics that I'm from the Middle East. But because I have this pale skin, many people in America have the absolute false idea about who Jewish people are, what the nation of Israel is, the history of Israel in the Middle East. And Tomi, I'll tell this right now to you and your audience. My conservative friends since October 7th of 2023 are the ones, I can only think of one or two liberal friends who have actually reached out to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I lost two families that I knew on October 7th, and they were peaceniks. They were the ones who were trying to make peace with the people just on the other side of the border there, and they were brutally murdered along with 1,200 others. I've got no place for Jew haters, for bigots, for racists to act the way these people are acting. And yeah, you have touched a raw nerve for me, Tomi.
Yeah, well,
I've been saying this for years. I've been saying this for many years, for us to be taking stronger action against these Jew haters in our midst.
And to that point, one of my best friends is Jewish, and she's voted Democrat for as long as she can vote. Not the most political person, but she's always voted Democrat. She voted for Hillary. She voted for Joe Biden. But she told me last week, and she grabbed my hand and she said, "Tomi, I voted for Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. Because when all of this was happening with October 7th and the aftermath after it, she's like, I follow all these Jewish accounts, and a lot of them that were mainstream, they weren't posting about it." She said, "You're one of the only people that was on my feed posting about how horrible this was. And President Trump was one of the only leaders that was speaking out about it, and my party was silent. So I voted for Trump." And I think there's a lot more Jewish Americans who did the same thing. Do you think that your party is going to reckon with itself on that point?
No, and I think that that's a real weakness for the Democrats. As you know, I'm very strong in my beliefs. And I have a lot of Republican friends, as you know, and I said to one of them, I said, this is literally a golden opportunity for the Republicans to pick off the moderately liberal Democrats. You're never going to get the progressives. They're just not going to come over until they choose. But somebody like me, and I haven't switched yet, Tomi, but I'm a prime target for, look, your own party thinks that you, as a Jewish person, don't have a right to exist in these places. There's too many people in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Now, Joe Biden, we can disagree, but he stood up for Israel. He helped to fund. He made sure that AOC didn't get to block Iron Dome, replenishment of a purely defensive weapon that she cried about on the floor of the House for a purely defensive weapon. So Jewish lives don't matter to AOC, apparently, unless we're just subjugated and we're dimituted, in this country and elsewhere. I'm not okay with that. But it's a real problem for the Democratic Party because they've coddled this false narrative about Middle Eastern history, about Jewish history. And what's happening? It's a ripe opportunity for the right to move in and pick off a bunch of moderately democratic Jewish people.
Well, you're right about that. It sounds to me like you're becoming more conservative every time we talk, which, I love to see. I want to talk one more thing about California because I'm perplexed by this. You got to tell me what the hell's going on with California Democrats in your legislature blocking this bill to make it a felony to purchase 16 and 17-year-olds for sex. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. I know California is progressive. I know they don't like to lock people up, but this is pretty egregious, and I don't know how they can spin this any other way, Ethan.
Yeah, so that's that progressive wing. I don't know if we've talked about this, but on October 7th of 2023, when all that went down and I saw people's reactions, I said, never, ever call me a progressive again. I'm just a liberal. I believe in equal rights, et cetera, the traditional definitions and critical thinking and a democratic process and due process. But a 16 and 17-year-old being purchased for trafficking, that's a felony. Anybody who argues otherwise is deluding themselves and or is somehow connected to this type of trafficking, or somebody close in their family is, or it's inconceivable that trafficking a 16 or 17-year-old would not be a felony. I am the only Democrat I know in the state of California who voted against both Propositions 47 and 57. I don't believe that soft on crime resolves anything unless you have programs in place to deal and get people the help that they need if they're able to be helped. But you just don't let people go on the streets after they've committed crimes. You don't just relabel it down. You don't say trafficking a 16-year-old is not a felony. That's insane.
Yeah. Boy. So I guess I would ask you this. My friend and I guess former colleague now, Steve Hilton, is running for governor in California. Would you consider casting your vote for Steve Hilton?
That he is not my current number one choice in the state of California. I believe that it's somebody else, and her name is Betty Yee. She's the former controller, immigrant. She worked in the family business in Chinatown, San Francisco. She's a real numbers-focused, kind of moderate Democrat. She's my number one choice. I've met Steve before as well. And while I think he's probably the best of the Republican candidates right now, in California, I just don't see a Republican making it into the final two right now.
Well, do you like what he has to say, though? Party ID aside, I understand that Democrats don't want to vote for a Republican in California. I get that. But a lot of the things that he's saying are very common sense, and I wouldn't consider him far right by any means.
Yeah, he's definitely not far right. And you might not know. I mean, I represent a plaintiff in a lawsuit against one of the Republican candidates right now because of him violating my client's civil rights. But Steve Hilton has look, he's smart about business. Let me put it that way. He is smart about balancing the books. He's smart about how to plan ahead. I believe Betty Yee is as well. But Steve Hilton, look, I have ripped on this for a long time too. And I know Gavin Newsom has watched me on Fox News arguing this in the past, that we are number 50 out of 50 states as a place to do business in. I'm a business owner myself and have been. I grew up in a family business. It's tragic the way California treats small and moderate sized businesses. It's cumbersome. The red tape is impossible. The taxes are extremely difficult. We need to make it easier to do business in California. And I believe that Steve Hilton has those ideas. And I believe on the Democratic side, I believe that that's Betty Yee who has those ideas as well.
Well, it sounds like you're becoming, like I said, more conservative by the day, but you're always rational and you're always giving it to us straight and transparently. And I always appreciate your honesty there. We found some areas of agreement and you taught me some stuff about the due process that I'm going to use and that I'm going to fall back on when needed. So Ethan, as always, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to talking soon.
Tomi, it's always great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Folks, tomorrow is the deadline, the Real ID deadline. And if you do not yet have one, please, for the love of all that is holy, stay home from the airport. It's time for Final Thoughts. Wednesday, May 7th is the Real ID deadline. It didn't sneak up on you. It's been law since 2005 and pushed back 4 times. So here is my plea for those of you who have not found time in the last 5+ years to take your documents to the DMV and get your ID with a little star in the corner and or do not have an updated passport in its place. Are you ready? For the love of God, stay home, or at least do not try to go to the airport and board a domestic flight. Do not try to argue with TSA. Do not act surprised when they don't cut you slack. And most importantly, do not stall or stifle or hold up or annoy those of us who were organized and, quite frankly, decent enough to get our IDs in a timely manner. The real ID is not a function of the surveillance state any more than a regular driver's license, passport, or voter ID is. It's a pain in the ass, and for some, a slight extra cost, but it's part of being a citizen, so you better get used to having to do things that are annoying and inconvenient. I don't like paying taxes or renewing my car insurance every year, but guess what? It's called life. And no, do not liken the real ID enforcement to the mask police because they are not in the same realm or planet. Healthy folks being forced to wear a cloth diaper on our faces to board an airplane was ridiculous and senseless and tyranny. Proving you are who you say you are and having the documentation to back it up is not tyranny, it's not oppressive, it's national security. And you are welcome to disagree with all of that, but please do it from the comfort of your own home and not the security line at the frickin' airport. Please and thank you. Those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in live tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes of the show on Outkick.com and Fox Nation. Also, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless from Nashville. God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.